Sorry. No separation around that.
That's good. We're good.
So thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this event tonight. We really appreciate it. It's been a lot of hard work and effort by all teams, especially Emily here in the middle. Without further ado, we're going to kick this off, and everyone can introduce themselves, starting with Ramit, who will be our moderator tonight.
Hey guys. My name is Ramit. I work for a company called Fueled. We have our offices just on Crosby Street, just around the corner. We're a technology consultancy. We build a lot of apps, mobile, desktop, all that. We've also started, last year we started building blockchain products. I think I'm moderating because we've invested a lot in the space. We were one of the early investors in Coinbase, and then kind of invested through the life cycle. We got lucky. We mostly got out of the market, at least 87% of our assets got out of the market in January.
Congratulations.
Yeah, but that was a total fluke, so we just happened to get lucky. Yeah. Go on.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Grad, one of the co-founders and CEO of Massive. We're building the world's largest distributed supercomputer, so you'll be able to soon go to some of your favorite services and pay, instead of with money or data or from watching ads, you can pay with some of your unused computing power.
Yeah, two of them. So I'm David Doss, and I head the marketing team at Energy, ENERGI, which is a next generation traditional cryptocurrency that's designed to employ 1 million people.
I'm the lone lawyer for once, which is kind of nice. So I am general counsel for a company called Genesis Block. We are a blockchain consulting company, and it's that meme, we're a startup that helps startup. And I also represent a placement agent, and we help our clients and our non-advisory clients in their capital raises as well.
That's amazing. Do you give legal opinions on paper?
Hell no.
Okay, all right, we'll talk later. I'm Tony Mugavero, co-founder and CEO of Ara, and we're a content marketplace, decentralized, leveraging blockchain technology, peer-to-peer content delivery, distributed identities, and we designed and built our own rewards protocol based on hosting and delivering content. So we kind of think about what we're doing as like what Bitcoin did to the banks, we're doing to the big media companies, and giving you ownership of your assets and content and data back to you. So that's us. This is our office.
Thanks, Tony. So for this talk, I'd love for it to be mainly a discussion between all of us. You guys are the experts in the room. I'm just here to facilitate a conversation between all of you. The topic is kind of foundational principles that we should think about, or that the industry should really think about. A fun idea of just taking it in a different direction just to get things going. So there's been a ton of scams that have happened in the market. I'd love to hear your favorite scams. Tony, please start.
I'll go. I mean, it's a disaster right now. That's what's happening with Bitcoin, Bitcoin ABC, Bitcoin SV, all the splits in the community, all of the cultish-like behavior, all of the manipulation that's happening around, people crashing other people's currency and taking hash power away from so-and-so and cutting deals with mining operations, and that is a giant scam happening in slow motion, and that's a lot different than an exit scam for $7 million by a bunch of people that you didn't know in some random country somewhere. It's
Nigerian prince.
It's something that is really, I feel like, contributing to what's happening in the markets right now. Which, from a price perspective, we all know that the price doesn't represent what's actually happening. But for the new people that are coming in, and the new people that came in at the end of last year, they are seeing that as a major problem. And so it's unfortunate that a handful of people are trying to claim ownership over what the real Bitcoin should be. And that's creating an environment that is toxic and poisonous. And these guys are doing it for money and ego, and it is a giant scam. And you know, it's part of the. It's unfortunate that that Bitcoin, you know, started out as this utopian version of, you know, no leadership and you know, no governing body. But you know, there's maybe a little bit of an argument to be made to have some leadership and a face and you know, a steady hand in a governing body that has clear expectations around what should be happening. Because right now, there is no leader, and everybody's trying to claim ownership, and everybody's trying to get rich, and it's bringing it down. So that's my biggest scam.
Oh, awesome. So just to reiterate the question, the question was, what is your favorite scam?
That's my favorite one.
That's your favorite one. Okay.
It's the biggest, my favorite. It's bullshit.
You really like that. Great. So I'm hoping from the rest of you, as you guys got a chance to think, as Tony was talking, what do you think kind of are the more interesting or innovative ones that are happening in space? Not like you know, cultural crisis ones, but just kind of like, oh wow, good job on that scam. Like some respect for that guy. You know, like from one hacker to another, like great job.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please. Go.
I'm not a fan of any of these scams, nor will I call out specifically a particular one.
Yeah.
But you know, we're at the beginning of this new technological revolution, where new technology, and we've seen now it's taken us 2 or 3 decades. Well, actually, like 5 or 6 decades to really see some of the implications of the internet play out since the original internet was like a paper in, you know, 60s, 70s. And now we're seeing what that means with data privacy and data becoming like the new currency, and really starting to understand what we've been giving away when we use free products for the last 2 or 3 decades. Now that we have these killer apps online, and we're at the beginning of this new technological revolution. It's terrible that a lot of people have been defrauded. We've kind of supercharged this new industry by pouring money into it from, you know, non-accredited investors sometimes, and from institutional investors alike. So hopefully what we're going to see now is kind of a culling of the scam and making a way for real projects that provide value and actually leverage the technology to provide solutions that we couldn't take advantage of before.
Yeah, very serious tone, I like it. You had potentially one that you want to share with us?
Actually, I think to me, I have the top 2 favorite in terms of type of scam. I don't want to name any names, but
of course not.
but rhymes with no. Anyway, but so one of them, one type I would call basically obfuscation scams, where you basically make the model so complicated that people say, "Wow, well, they must know what they're talking about." Whereas, like, we have this, you know, logarithmically decreasing, you know, multi-tiered muck-any-muck, whatever. So that kind of adding complexity, either deliberately or accidentally, to essentially fool people, I think is one of my kind of favorites. And then my other favorite is basically scamming the scammers. I mean, you were talking about essentially, you know, adding or helping the helpers, but I think scamming the scammers is almost kind of like that. You know, props for actually. I mean, you know, don't agree with the end, but like kind of the if you're going to scam someone, it might as well be a scammer. So the people who say, you know, try and get some of these scam coins, you know.
Can you give us an example of
let's say fake exchange listers. Where it's like we're gonna list your coin, and we have a relationship with Binance, and for the low price of, you know, 2 Bitcoin, we're gonna list you on Binance. All you have to do is send the money up front, that sort of thing. I think that's a pretty, you know, interesting one. Unfortunate but interesting.
Have you seen the one, not in the blockchain world, but just the one that I think about when scamming the scammers? The whole Nigerian prince one that I was alluding to earlier. Someone got an email. It's like, hey, you know, can you send me money? And this whole thing. I'll send it back to you. And he was like, yeah, you can do that, but in order for you to do that, I just need you to have a tattoo on your arm of this face. And if you can do that, then I'll send you the money. So he actually scammed the guy into getting a tattoo. And he got it, he sent a photo back, and obviously he was scammed. I thought that was pretty
Nice. Okay.
Great. Do you have one?
I mean, I don't have a specific one. I mean, I haven't found one where I'm just like, okay, bad props. Like, that was a good one.
Have you been scammed?
I'm way smarter than that. No, I haven't. But I'm also very conservative. I just don't. I have a very hard. I can smell bullshit, so I just try to stay away. But what gets to me is that you see other advisors in the space, and they're saying, I can help you, or we're going to form this group, and we're going to have this lobbying effort, and then we're going to help you. We're going to, through the power of numbers, we're going to be able to get you in touch with the groups you need, the investors you need, the ecosystem participants that you need. But membership is tiered. The highest level is going to cost you 2 Bitcoin. The second level it's 1, and it's like, guys, come on. If you're really going to be a part of, if you're going to, it's not $3,900.
Right.
I mean, you also have, like, most ICOs have had some kind of scheme set up where if you buy the first X amount of token, it's this price and then this price, and they're just transparent Ponzi schemes. I'm not sure how this has worked.
Right.
So it's just crazy.
So, taking a little bit more of a serious, so what do you feel that these scams have taught us? Like, what have we learned so far from the industry? I think, Tony, you went into that a little bit, but are there any lessons to be learned from all of this in terms of the ideas? Oh, and also just to give us, myself and the audience, an understanding, how many ICOs, raise your hand if you've invested in an ICO. The initial coin offering, not after, okay, got it. And anyone on? Okay, okay, great. I was just curious. I've not invested in anything. It's just I've always been kind of skeptical or scared. And so, Tony, you said you have. What gave you the confidence?
Well, I mean, I think
it doesn't
if you look at like what's happening in the industry, there's organizations that are trying to legitimize it, and that unfortunately or fortunately, I think it's a little bit of both. It comes down to how people are playing in the regulations, and the U.S. is the SEC has been muddy and cloudy on what it's saying that it should be doing, but how they should treat these new assets. But if you look at some frameworks like the SAFT or the Brooklyn Project, or at least people are trying to make an effort to say, here is a safe framework. It's unfortunate that the SEC has kind of taken enforcement actions and not really given a framework. It's like we are supposed to try to figure out what the framework is based on enforcement actions. And so, if you look at like what Token Foundry did, and even though they only did a few token sales, it was like at least they had some concept of how you participate inside the U.S. as a utility token, and say like, I want to participate in a phone sale. I'm in the U.S. and I have proof of use, and there was like some framework there that gives you some comfort, versus like rando website that's based in Cayman Islands, and I got a 40% bonus on this, and I got to get in now. It's like that level of trust starts to become a factor.
You went into it a little bit there, but could you expand on what some of the frameworks that you feel that would work? Like, what has been tested that that the SEC really should be looking into more as opposed to?
It seems to come down to how it's marketed, whether there's an expectation of profit, and if you're out there saying if you get in now you're going to make lots of money in every manifestation of that, then that probably presents a problem to the SEC. The other problem is not having actual function of the token. So many people just came up with a Squarespace site and a white paper and said that we're gonna, change the world in 18 months, and took $20 or $30 million and ghosted everybody with the money and never really built anything or overcommitted. And so, taking the opposite approach is actually build something that works. And even if you have to take real traditional venture capital, even if it's $500,000 or whatever, that is plenty to build a functioning network that leverages blockchain technology. build the thing that works and show people that it works, and they're going to be more inclined to get behind it because it's a functioning network that has a product that people can test. So there's a couple different things.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I mean, I think if there's one lesson to come out of this, and it shouldn't even be a lesson, I mean, what happened to common sense, right? I mean, seriously. There's a logical way to do certain things, and I think people have gotten so caught up and wrapped up in the fact that these projects that had nothing but a white paper and a flashy, I mean, who uses Flash anymore? But they had these flashy websites, and they raised hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, who needs to raise hundreds of millions of dollars for an MVP? I mean, that's not how it's been done before. And yes, we're trying to disrupt things and do different things, but that's what friends and family money's for, right? That's how you get to your MVP, and that's how you have something, and that's so much more compelling than a website and Mayweather or some stupid celebrity shilling your project. I mean, it just goes back to common sense. People want something tangible. I mean, if you try to explain what blockchain is, people's eyes just roll into the back of their heads because you're not making it tangible for them. And I think that's just something people have to realize. Make it tangible.
And I also think, I mean, if you're trying to insert a specific technology or framework into your product for the sake of a marketing purpose, and it's a lot of effort, and it veers you off the course of actually building something that's useful. So there's a term used at another panel, it was friction coin. If doing this doesn't make sense for your company, it's going to hurt your company. And we saw a few things happen like that. We saw ICOs where people are creating a new currency. So now on top of building, they're doing a few part things at once. They're marketing their product, they're building the product, and now they have to understand monetary policy and kind of like regulate how people use this new currency. Or other people will take it and put it into their projects and add like 8 extra steps for how a user is going to use it. Even if it just means they're getting paid in a token. You're already creating a boundary for the usefulness of your product. So there's a bunch of stuff that's going on. I mean, the reason why we care about founding principles for our company is not only because we deal with a lot of privacy and security issues, but because it's kept us out of a lot of trouble. And
Could you expand on your founding principles?
yeah, we're building an ethical alternative to online monetization, and it starts there. And we're still forming that and building the movement around it. But it's really important for us to have a set of principles that we can honor throughout the life cycle of the company, no matter how we shift and change and pivot based on what we learn from the marketplace. So things that are like in agreement with everyone, that will never violate, but also gives us enough room to build something that's actually useful. And part of doing that is bringing on really great experts that are way smarter than I am, luckily, who are helping us with this, who have done it for other companies before. And you think about, think Linux Foundation, Mozilla, Firefox, and Mozilla Foundation. These are great examples of companies that were able to have these kinds of like principle-based approach or code of ethics and could build really useful products. They always stood by that starting like these delineations, and they built like widely used products that people trust.
So, Kathy, sorry, go ahead.
Well, one of the advantages of not having a microphone is I get to listen to everyone's responses first and kind of like put them into mine in a way. But yeah, so back to kind of that original question around kind of how to mitigate scams. I would maybe take it kind of a level wider and think about how to mitigate failure, essentially. So, some of these things that we're labeling scams, they could be deliberately scams or they could be accidentally scams, but the commonality is that failure, be it intentional or not, right? Someone who loses out on their money, their livelihood, whatever, doesn't care whether, the people meant to do it or not, I think, in many cases anyway. But to avoid that or mitigate that failure, I think there are a couple of key principles that we've really tried to think through. So for one thing, I would say it comes down to having at least a plan for a sustainable business model, a way to actually keep the development going, to keep the marketing going, regardless of what happens, with the ICOs or the market or what have you. That's one. I think another second one is around simplicity, really kind of to that point of those obfuscation scams that I was talking about earlier, really having something that, a lot of the sort of the things that work the best in this world can be very simple. Certainly there are exceptions, but doing things simply in an effective manner is hard but important. And then I would say a third component is really a community predicated approach. What I mean by that is transparency, really being able to say build out the community, have an inclusive space where you can tell people you're doing something in advance and then do it. I think a lot of the problems that have happened have been around people doing things behind closed doors and then reaping, most if not all of the benefits. So having that transparency of bringing in, the public on that conversation can be another really important aspect.
So, Kathy and Tony, one point that you both kind of shared in a way was just the idea of potentially traditional capital raise might trump like an ICO, in the sense that the ICO market was so flooded with products that were kind of pre-products. You mentioned just like, hey, that's what friends and family capital is for, and Tony, you mentioned, hey, there's like traditional capital that you should potentially go out for. Would you guys say that maybe in a market like this, that ICO should play a role later in the process as opposed to so early? When we think of an IPO, it's very much when the public can determine a value for the business, and maybe some consumers can know that, or analysts have access to public financials. And in the pre-product space, this is maybe a space for institutional capital to play, where people would specialize. I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have something usable. If you're going to sell something to somebody, you better have something that's usable right away, or
as opposed to an idea
in very short order. Yeah, because if you're talking about retail consumers, investors, you should have something usable in very short order or immediately, so that they know what they're getting into. And it's a participatory ecosystem. So somebody is buying into the network to have access to it so they can use it, versus I'm betting on an idea and hopefully in a year and a half or 2 years these people are going to build the thing. That's a venture bet versus participating in a network.
Yeah, so do you think the venture bets should be in a way decentralized?
I think there's an opportunity to do that, but it's still a security at that point, and you still need to do diligence and know that that company is going to execute on the thing they're promising that they're going to execute on. So you have to make an educated decision and not throw away the money. And we've seen this even with Kickstarter a little bit.
Yeah.
Kickstarter, people will put projects up there and they'll get $2 or $3 million and they're going to build the next thing, and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen and they don't return the money, or they've spent most of it. And so the key to, and there's a security token and a utility token. There's the key is to, if you're going to do a public sale, it's a participatory thing. People are buying into an existing network and they're going to use those tokens to operate in the network, like airline miles or something.
Right.
Versus, and in that scenario, there's not the issue of here's our financials.
Yeah.
And here's in that scenario, you know the rules of the platform. You know that if I buy a loot crate, I'm going to get this gun and I'm going to be able to play this game with it. You're buying a digital good and you're using it to operate in the network.
Right.
If you're investing in a company before a product, then you have financial transparency on what the company's doing. And then that's the whole struggle with what the SEC is doing right now, is that they're determining, if you do a public sale of a utility token in a participatory network with an existing product, is that something that should have complete financial transparency, like an airline miles program, or is that something that should be tradable on an exchange like a security? So it's not. It's a different class of asset.
Yeah.
And so,
but what we've noticed is because of the SEC rules, people are just describing things as utility tokens just to get around the security token.
I think we might be I think we're a little past that. I don't know how ICOs are going to come back from this.
Right.
There's a reason why companies stay private for a certain amount of time.
You have to have you have to have a functioning network. ICOs will continue to exist like Kickstarter continues to exist.
But Kickstarter has real product come out of it. And
That's what I'm saying.
I mean-
That's exactly what I'm saying. If you have a real utility, you have a real functioning product, and people buy access into that, your token sale makes sense.
there's an inherent problem with, if there's something real, then there's something different. Maybe it would be an STO or a different structure than ICO, because there's a lot of negativity around ICO. I mean, I think people start to see companies that ICO'd and already associate them with other ICO companies that may have failed or been fraudulent. When we looked at doing an ICO, which we aren't doing and have no plans for, we looked at GitHub commits of ICO companies in relation to how much they raised, and noticed that the more money they raised, the less they were committing code.
Interesting.
So we saw that and said, wow, all these ICO companies aren't committing code anymore. Shouldn't they be committing way more code now? And it was the opposite. So it just seemed like there could be problems created from overcapitalization outside of the company that wouldn't create like the kind of positive start pressure to actually innovate and build stuff that people will pay for, or that there's a path to scale towards some kind of outcome that's fair and reasonable based on the expectations you set for all shareholders of the company.
Great. So I really like the tension between you and Tony there. Tony, I think I saw you shake your head for a second there. Would you like to elaborate on
I mean, yeah, there's a clear difference between a security and a utility. And so if you have a functioning network, if I go buy airline miles right now, that's a utility token. I can go buy 200,000 airline miles right now and not use them. I could go to the bookstore and buy 10,000 books right now, and the people at the register might look at me weird, and I might not ever read one of those books. And then they have value. Some of them might go up, some of them might go down, but I can go back and sell them at some point. So like, if I have a functioning network that I can go use the token to operate in immediately, then you're buying a utility. You're buying a functioning network. If the ICOs that happened were all securities. They were all securities. There's no question about that. That is what the SEC is saying, and that's why Jay Clayton is like, everything I've seen is a security. Because it's true. It is a security. It's all bullshit, and like nobody had any product. But what's blockchain 2.0, 10 years in, is real products now getting built by real teams that have raised actual venture capital, and they're bringing blockchain solutions to Microsoft and Amazon and supply chain and healthcare, and those are real functioning networks that people are buying into, and you're buying a piece of that network. And if you think about how broken investing in companies is, you are investing in a team that is the proxy for the thing that they're going to build. And so if I put $10 million into an organization of people and they're promising to me that they're going to build some network, then they don't build that network. I invested in these people by proxy and hoped to God that they would build this network. If there is a functioning network that is decentralized and I buy a piece of that network, there's no human error. It's a participation in a functioning network that's governed by math. And that's a fundamentally different thing today than I invested in an ICO in 2017, hoped to God for fucking Lambos and the moon, and then everybody ghosts. Like, it's a completely different paradigm.
I have something on that topic.
Yeah. Get in there.
Okay.
Get in there.
Yeah, so I mean, a couple of things you're saying resonated with me. I mean, for one thing, you're talking about basically kind of this paradox of investing in a company, and essentially the people working on something versus investing in the network. And then I'm hearing this tension of
Loving the tension.
Loving the tension, absolutely. Loving this tension of ICO, STO versus sort of traditional venture capital. But to that point about kind of separating church and state of the company versus the network, what Energy is betting on is just that, of having the network separate, live and running, and then having that on a coin issuance model that then allocates bi-weekly an amount to a treasury that funds the foundation, that funds a a company that works on building and developing it. So there is that separation, but there is also that opportunity to scale up on a simple percentage funding model to scale up the assets allocated to work on development, work on marketing, as the demand, as the value in the network rises. So say right now with energy being around 15 million, $10 million market cap, somewhere in that range, the treasury assets have actually hit a point of surpassing, say, the assets of a Dash treasury. So to that point, being able to separate church and state, network and company, but have a system where the network can actually fund the foundation that can keep building the network has been our play, our added value to the ecosystem.
Jason, you seem to disagree. Tell us more.
Well, it's not, I don't completely disagree that I'm not saying that institutional investment is right and ICOs are wrong, or the opposite. I guess
Neither am I.
I'm seeing that there are some practical issues with using the ICO as a funding model right now. Not that there's something inherently wrong with ICO in your company, but that there's issues of optics. There's issues of also having outside factors in the rest of the market affect your company, and having a market crash and your coin going down because it signals to general investors who are investing because they're investing in coin.
Yeah.
And also being open to market manipulation by market makers early on in the life cycle of business, and having essentially like hedge funds come in and just manipulate your currency because it's easy, because you're not a government regulated body and there's no consequences for it. So there's some practical circumstances and risks that I feel add to the risk portfolio of an already risky startup. Whereas personally, I look at risk as something that we want to de-risk our company over time. So that's one thing. I also think that the airline miles example might not suit you that well, and I don't know enough about it, but I was looking into this a while ago. I think there's some pretty serious problems with airline miles programs, and then banks' ability to write them off or not, because people aren't spending them like they're supposed to. And so just for the sake of, I'll look into it too. I don't know enough to give you some great insights into that, but it might be worth your time to look into airline miles programs, or maybe you have and you can actually speak to that, and I appreciate that.
It's a simple enough paradigm to say that I'm buying a token representation into a network that I can then later use these tokens to purchase access to that network. It's a simple paradigm. Whether that from a financial perspective makes sense for the airlines, you could argue the same thing in the cryptocurrency space. There's a lot of things that might not make sense when you peel back 100 layers and look at them from a certain way. But at the simplicity, like the abstracted paradigm, it's a simple one to understand. And we don't think about utility tokens as an investment perspective. We think about them as revenue. So if you are an organization that is selling utility tokens and people are buying those utility tokens, they are giving you revenue. That's different than if somebody is investing in your company and they're taking ownership and equity, and that's not taxed, and or you sign an 83B election and you get preferred tax treatment. It's a completely different paradigm. So they can both exist. I don't think or anybody is saying that an ICO with a utility token is the way to fund your company. I think we've learned that that's a broken model. If you want to fund a company, raise money and do a security. If you want to sell access into a network as a utility and make revenue, then that's revenue. And like the way we think about it is, if you're sufficiently decentralized, then your treasury shouldn't matter as much. What happens with the token price and how things are going up and down shouldn't. Bitcoin's not going bankrupt.
But they're also not developing significantly on a volunteer basis.
So it's not entirely binary. It's on the spectrum, right? So how much is the community building what you're doing, and how much are they driving what you're doing, and how much is there a central authority that's actually governing what's happening? Because that's another real point of contention from the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the central organization in control of this treasury? Because if they are, and people have been benefiting from it financially, then it might be in security land.
Right, but I think the problem is going back to the whole idea of tangibility, right? I mean, we're still talking in hypotheticals right now. I mean, that's where we are. We're in hypothetical land. And until people have these platforms and networks and ecosystems where something like a utility token could be used, we're all just kind of, I mean, we're all guessing here, right? We're taking what we know hasn't worked. I mean, I think for me, when I first heard about ICOs, I was actually kind of excited about it, because for me, for once, you know, having worked in traditional financial services for a very long time, and seeing the types, the investor types, the investor profiles of people who are able to invest in certain projects, IPOs are sold out, you know, before they can even get to, you know, a normal accredited investor, like the doctor in Milwaukee, right? I mean, it just doesn't get there unless you have an in with some bank that's gonna, you know, help you, right? And so the idea of ICOs and having, and that's why I think things like Kickstarter are so great, because you have these little projects and you're able to help founding teams live their vision, right? They're able to kind of take that next step. And the whole idea of ICOs was another way of fundraising without having to go the normal traditional route, having to find the VCs, finding, you know, other venture studios where they took 50% of your equity for, you know, a small amount of your company, for a small amount. The idea was to allow people who were truly interested in a project or a solution and to help invest in it. It just got to the point where, you know, when you're raising $100 million, it kind of, you start seeing dollar signs and seeing, you know, the get-rich-quick schemes, as opposed to really trying to fund a project. And I think ICOs had a great reason, and they started out kind of in a different way, but it grew into this thing. I mean, no one needs to raise $100 million to start a company, right? No one does. And I think it just got out of hand. I would like to see a point where ICOs could eventually be a new way to invest, just the way Kickstarter is, but just on a larger scale. But right now, with all the uncertainty, with projects that haven't, you know, come out with MVPs or anything of the sort, I think you're going to have to kind of go back to what is currently out there: traditional VCs, friends and family money, early rounds, sell a piece of your company, do debt. There are all these options out there, and you can build a viable project and then see how you take it from there.
I'm hearing a couple of themes there from both of you, but so to those kind of earlier points about call it, you know, open source sort of volunteerism versus, say, more controlled full-timerism, if that's a thing. Really, historically, when you've looked at companies that have been successful in the past, products that have been successful in the past, it's been both. You know, let's say, you know, Microsoft or Google or Facebook, they have that open source that comes in and that adds huge value, but then they also have you know, some people that are able to kind of push that in a specific direction. So in terms of sort of, you know, value being created through history, that has been a successful model, more so than purely full-time, sort of part-time volunteers. But on kind of a similar note as well, being able to have essentially a combination of some centralization, some decentralization can provide that sort of that mix of value, where if you can have, say, a decentralized consensus mechanism for what a treasury does, but you can then, you know, based off of those decentralized decisions, have people who are tasked with sort of carrying out the will of the people, then that can be one way forward. And then to your point, also, I mean, it sounds like, you know, at this point we're in that kind of inductive phase of, you know, we don't know what we should do necessarily as an industry, but we do know what we shouldn't do. And we're getting, you know, there are going to be multiple answers depending on the use case, on the business model, or whatnot, but there are way more answers that are wrong, and we're starting to see some of those.
Jason, if you want to add? Nods.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to see more living up to expectations in general. If I'm investing in a product coming to market, the product should, well, hopefully, if I were doing it, it would be close enough to market where I can see that it's actually going to make it there. And that was a backward team. You said you were going to build this, you showed some progress, we put some money into it, we fuel this last leg, whatever, and you got there, or whatever leg, depending on the product. And if I'm spending $1 and that earns me, or I'm spending $100 and that earns me 5,000 Starbucks, and because I use Starbucks, that's a loyalty program that gets me X amount of coffees, or I get extra coffees in that, then that's great. And I wouldn't want to see deflationary pressure on my Starbucks because of what's going on in general with other, kind of fraud in the market. And so I guess that's, like, practically speaking, why I see a problem with some of these coins that are creating new currencies, no matter what they're used for. If pressure in the market can greatly devalue something where you bought it with the expectation of spending X on and getting Y, then that's extremely risky situation to put maybe your less knowledgeable investor in, or less knowledgeable user in. If I earn game points, or if I buy game points, I can buy, I don't want to use like army language here. I can buy a magic rainbow road that gets me to X, Y, and Z. And I want to be able to do that.
What army
I don't
is
want.
that?
No, not. I'm going away from the army. I don't want to buy swords. I just want the path. I look forward to the day when we see more general expectations being set and met, whether it's for buying X Starbucks to buy Y coffees, or buying into a project with a real outcome, or a realized outcome.
Got it. Thanks. So I'm going to ask one more question. I'd love for the audience to start thinking some questions for the panelists. So riffing on a little bit of what you said that you'd like to see, I'd love to hear from you guys what you're afraid of seeing. So when you think of the future, what are some of the things that you're scared of?
And the most important thing is that this is easier, cryptocurrency becomes easier than things that exist. Because if it doesn't, then there will never be adoption. So, like, if I could just go use my credit card to buy something and it happens immediately, great. If I have to go buy tokens first from Coinbase and maybe transfer that over to Binance and buy some altcoin and then bring that back into a network and then use those tokens to purchase something, then I'm probably not going to go through the headache of doing it. So the adoption that's going to happen, I feel like there's so much, like people are saying blockchain. Consumers don't care about that. It's like going back to the mid 90s when everybody was like internet. Like if you went to pitch somebody today and you're like, this is on the internet, they'll be like, yeah, who cares? Like I don't care how email works. I don't care how I get my videos. I just want to do it. And so we have to figure out as an industry, we can talk amongst ourselves about interesting technologies or how to form this whole space, but at the end of the day, if we don't get consumers to do something that is really simple and frictionless for them to do while still leveraging all of the efficiencies and the transparencies that are brought by blockchain technology, they shouldn't even know that that's a thing. Just like they don't know what MySQL is a thing, or Postgres, or SMTP, or Bind9. They don't know what any of that is. And they don't care. They just know that they get their email or they get their message on their phone, and that's it. So we have to get to that point in this industry, and I'm nervous right now that everybody's caught up on the buzzwords of the blockchain, and that that the blockchain and decentralized is the selling point. People don't give a shit about that. They just want easy, fast. I don't have to think about that. Oh, I can just put my credit card in, and I can put $12.99 a month. I don't have to think about it. Great, sign me up. That's it. So that's like our challenge is, I think, as an industry, is getting out of that mechanic and starting to build products that makes people's lives better.
So do you think that you have a fear that interface might not come?
I just hope that it comes sooner. I think it will come.
Yeah.
It's like when you started seeing HTTP pages in 1992.
Right.
You look at it now and it's like, so you can drag and drop things on Squarespace and have a beautiful website in a few minutes, but like back in the day, it's like really cumbersome, and there were whole like web development shops that got rich at the end of the 90s.
Yeah.
And now you think web development shop, like what are you doing?
So I have a mobile development shop. In case you guys were curious.
Mobile.
Yeah. Shit.
I think just adding on to that, I mean, technology moves really quickly. It's always evolving. You know, what we called emerging technology yesterday is you know, old school today. I think and you're right, you know, people don't want to know about how blockchain works. I ask people all the time, when they ask me, what is blockchain, how does it work? I ask them, do you believe the internet exists? Yes. Do you know how it works? No, but you know it exists, it's there, right? I mean, I think that's where we kind of need blockchain to be, but I also want people to understand that the blockchain technology of today will not be the blockchain technology of tomorrow, right? And I think there needs to be a lot of education in this space. People need to understand that blockchain is it's another way for things, for transactions to happen, right? And I think that's how you have to think about it, not just in terms of how exactly the blockchain is made up or how it actually works from a technical perspective, but it's allowing us to interact with each other in different ways.
Is there anything you're scared of?
I'm scared that people are so caught up in the buzzwords of the nefarious actors, right? Yeah. Of focusing on the price of Bitcoin and what that means from a speculation perspective, and not understanding that this technology could be amazing, and that we're going to be so short-sighted, and that the investment needed today in order to develop and build this technology is not going to come because people are so fixated on the bullshit.
Got it.
Got one this time. Yeah, so I think one of my biggest concerns is that a lot of these projects are going to run out of gas along a probably pretty long journey. And I think there's been a lot of, I'm hearing a lot of sort of people talking about sort of the car they're building having, you know, some really fancy spoiler on it, or like an unbreakable windshield or whatever, but then that car ends up running out of gas and it's stuck no matter how fancy the windshield is. So I mean, to that point, I think again, historically, a lot of projects, when they have raised capital, you know, outside of the space, they've done it to grow, not to stay alive, right? So a lot of really successful businesses and projects in the past have sort of a baseline of being able to, you know, to keep the lights on, pay the employees, but raise money to actually grow and build something they couldn't before. So to that point, it's my hope to see kind of more of those, say more cars that are maybe like, you know, solar powered or something like that, where basically they aren't going to run out of gas along the way, and then, you know, you can have teams kind of repairing, building as that journey progresses.
Go for it, Jason.
I'm not worried about blockchain dying or projects that should dying either. Great, like this happens. You know, technology can be a magnifier of intention. Unfortunately, we don't always understand our intentions or understand the implications of them, even when we're well-intentioned. Hence the phrase, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." And also, technologic progress tends to far outpace social innovation that allows us to fully understand the implications of our actions. So my concern would be that we're creating these great new technologies that can magnify our intentions, and it just continues to allow people to do the same bad things, but more of them that we've seen in the past, and create wider divides with income inequality, or create worse implications for the environment. Hopefully we're all on the same page here in New York City, that something might not be right with what we're putting into the environment. So my fear is that, you know, irresponsible people could be driving toward something that might suit themselves versus helping all of humanity, which is pretty easy in the overabundant world where we live.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for sharing that point. Yeah. I'd love to open it up to the floor. Immediately your hand went up. I love that. You can sitting on that question for a while. Please stand up and tell us your name and then the question.
My name is Bill, and first of all, I want to thank all of you for this very thoughtful
That was my job at the end there, but thank you.
Why not? Anyway, so I've been in tech for a while, and I've also been doing crypto for a few years, and I think that we can't emphasize enough that we shouldn't lose perspective. And maybe glossing what Tony was saying a few minutes ago, you know, we're at the end of an infrastructural phase of this industry, and the industry is kind of waiting for, you know, like it's iTunes moment, or it's Amazon moment, or it's AOL moment, you know, where something comes along kind of like a super Venmo or a super PayPal that allows you to avail yourself of kind of a very quick and easy way of doing business, and, you know, leverages, you know, leverages all the efficiencies that we talk about when we talk about cryptocurrency. But I feel like, you know, it's bad, it's going to get worse. A lot of these projects that don't deserve to live will die. And a lot of the folks that you think will die out won't die out. Because I remember, like, I used to work in investment banking, and I used to work at UBS. And I remember, like, I was in London, and we're having a meeting, and we were talking about Amazon. And at that point, Amazon would lose money on every book that they sold. And if you told us that Amazon would be around X number of years later, and they would have killed retail and, you know, leveraged their unused capacity into a cloud business, and on and on and on, I would have said you're crazy.
Sorry, what was your question?
So I was just ranting. So the question, I was just ranting. The question is, we shouldn't fall victim to the bullshit. And I was going to say, I disagree with Tony, because there is always centralization. There is always centralization. There is always centralization. If we think that there's going to be like some mathematical resolution to problems, that's not true, because even if there isn't a central body like the SEC or whatever, right? The big whales, the people who are the major investors, are always going to be the people who are calling the tone. So, I mean, I just wanted to add that to what you said.
I appreciate that. And the way we think about it is very distinct things. We think about it as, if you're developing protocol level technology that should be available to lots and lots of people, then you need to set that free. And like, if you think about what's going on today, and like the idea of gas in the tank, I think we think about, you know, like, how much money do you have to survive? If you have a big enough community building and working on that project, that's the gas. You don't need money to operate a movement, and the community will operate that movement. And if you look at HTTP, right now what's happening is everybody's like, I'm building the next HTTP. Let's go slit each other's throats and see who wins. That's what's happening right now. And it's like, the protocols that are gonna win are the ones that build the best community. And it's not gonna be about money, it's gonna be about how open it is, and how easy it is to use, and how flexible it is, and how much, you know, it can possibly support in the world. And you know, to your point, I fully agree. HTTP makes no money. They make no money. You know who makes all the money? Google and Amazon. But that's not what it's about. So we separate those things very clearly and distinctly. We're building protocol level technology, we're releasing that to the world. We know how to use those protocols, let's build the value on top of it, and we can build for-profit entities all day long. And the paradigm there, maybe the modern example, is consensus and Ethereum. Who knows how profitable consensus is, but doesn't matter. They're making the protocol useful, and the community is what's driving the protocol. And so we clearly separate those things. I think you can have both of them at the same time. It's not one or the
Why
other.
can't we use Bitcoin as our example instead, where they own 51% of the hashing power or something like that?
And
So they've created a giant faction, and they're pooling a community together to do it because they have the largest pool. Like, I mean, they've captured.
I would imagine that
And they're
there's
also
a,
incentivizing their community.
there's got to be a modern solution to that.
Is it regulation?
It's not regulation.
You don't
It's
need
not
to-
regulation.
You can talk.
Start it.
It's not regulation.
So, kind of tying some of those points all together, talking about incentivizing the community, I disagree that it's all about the community. I think it's, at the end of it, all about value, and the value being created as well as the value being obtained. And so some of that value can be created by the community, but the community needs incentives, and that can take many different forms, but they need value, be that money or some other incentive. So that's kind of one of the points I was hearing. And then on another, around that kind of centralization versus decentralization, I do agree that to a certain extent there will always be some level of centralization in most, if not all, projects. But at the same time, to mitigate that centralization and have that community is very important, but also to clearly distinguish between centralization and monopoly is very important. So there's a value to demonopolizing the space, allowing that community to choose how they contribute and choose how they get their value, rather than only having a few choices.
That was great. Oh, last question. Last question. Actually, sorry, last rant, because it seems like that's the way to provoke the crowd, and I really enjoyed that. So thank you so much for that. Rant right here.
I feel like I can provoke rants.
Yeah, please.
So top predicts for 2019 and why?
Top
Predicts.
Predictions. You want to ramp that into a rant? Okay, fine.
4 7 years ago.
How about one person take this so that we're all not doing predictions? Yeah? Or how about one prediction each?
Try to make it quick. I think security tokens are not the savior of everything. I think there's going to be a cleaning up and reissuance of what was the shell of the ICO. I think there will be modern versions of token sales that are.
Can I just jump in there?
Yes.
And like, as an investor, what is my incentive for investing in a community? Like, I want cold hard assets. What am I getting from your community?
You're an investor. You're not a community person. So why do people give Kickstarter millions of dollars?
Like, why are we investing in ICOs if it's just like the end result? We're not cashing out anymore as we were a year ago.
It's not an investment.
So, but why are we giving you our money?
It's not an investment. You're
Where are we
buying
getting
access
from
to. Why do you buy loot crates in the game?
I don't.
Because you are not the customer. There's lots of
To get the loot. To get the loot. That's what's in the crate.
Yeah,
That's why
yeah,
it's in the name.
Yeah, there's investment that people are expecting return, and then there are networks that people are buying into that have functionality.
I really applaud people with disposable assets that they can invest in consoles.
Yeah, have you seen Xbox has Xbox dollars? Like, you can buy Xbox dollars and just sit on them, and then someday buy games at some point. And maybe those games go on sale, so your dollars are actually more valuable that day. I don't know. Like, there are modern, large-scale, multi-billion-dollar examples of utility token frameworks that exist today, and there is a modern version of that that's going to be tracked and transparent on the blockchain that is separate from investment in a company for expectation of profit. Those are two separate paradigms. But if you're an investor, invest early, make bets, make bets.
I have invested in ICOs. I've been part of this game very early on, and
What, December 2017?
prior.
Okay,
Prior.
September
So-
2017. I love it, we're good.
Well, I'm just gonna say, I mean, I don't think security tokens aren't gonna be a thing because of your reasons. I mean, I think it's because the SEC is gonna still sit on their ass and not come out with any more clarification. They claim they're going to come out with some plain language, guidance next year to kind of help this space and help figure things out. It's not going to happen, but I think that's why security tokens aren't going to take off, not because people are going to all of a sudden have these communities and they're going to want to build communities and do certain things. I think for me, that's kind of an idealist concept. And until we have something tangible that we can actually play around with, I think that 2019 is still going to see some stagnation, and it might start, ramping up towards the end of the year, when people kind of get their heads out of their asses and try to, figure out, let's try to build something real. But I think it's going to be slow going.
Yeah, I don't really necessarily have anything super highfalutin. I'm just looking forward to, for one thing, seeing, say, Consensus 2019 and comparing it to Consensus 2018. That'll be interesting.
Go for it.
I think we're going to see a lot of projects fold and a lot of coins fail, and a lot of investors hopefully getting their money back. I'm not quite sure how it'll totally unfold, but if you haven't checked out what's going on with Basis, I'll be interested to see how regulators treat that. So I think that's a pretty safe bet that some coins are going to die in the next year, and we'll learn a lot of lessons from it.
And not because they're scams.
And just because the monetary policy didn't work, or there was regulation in the way that took a year to catch up with them, or 2 years, or however many years. And I hope that at that time people do get their heads out of their assets and stop investing in extremely high-risk products that they might not have full knowledge of.
That was a better ending than I was going to have. So let's end on that note. Thanks, guys.